And you have to know that. You have to understand that, and you have to accept that as a thought when you're dealing with intelligence matters. And someone, Mike Hayden, the other day said something to the effect that if it's intelligence, it's not a fact. And that's, I'm afraid, the world we're living in. I think it was Russert on Meet the Press who said he wrote a book about his father's sayings, and I think his father said something to the effect that the world is run by those who show up. You know, it's simple, but it has a certain value. The one I always liked, I had I almost said the pleasure, the privilege, the experience is the word I was looking for, of running the war on poverty for Richard Nixon's administration after Sergeant Shriver had departed. And everyone was mad at that program because the mayors were mad, the county commissioners were mad, the governors were furious, Republican and Democrat, it didn't matter. And it was one of those things that reminded me of the saying that beware of ideas that are bold, innovative, and new. I've seen ideas that are bold, innovative, and new that are stupid. And what you really need to do is to try things and then see how they're working, but be willing to measure them. Be willing to take the time to see whether or not it's just an expenditure of effort or whether it's really producing some results. And that's important. I was asked to speak briefly because I'm told that this crowd, all of you, like to ask questions. And I told Ronnie that my wife Joyce may not ask any questions. But if someone asks me my favorite rule, having served in government, it is this. It was from Admiral Hyman Rickover, who served longer as a naval officer, I think, than any man in history. And he said, if you're going to sin, sin against God, because God forgives. Never sin against the bureaucracy. It lies in wait and will get you. So, and I don't think you should let David wear it.
Okay, so would everyone like to line up and behind the mic?
Not everyone.
I wasn't clear.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yes, sir.
Bob Lawrence, Southwest Florida. Mr. Rumsfeld, I've stood in front of you many times. Down in Washington.
A little closer to the mic.
Down in Washington, and I think what the Republican Party is looking for is leadership, which we lack today. We lack the wisdom that
Put the mic closer to you.
Okay. We lack it.
Someone back there said louder and funnier.
I'm going to be serious for a minute because the Republican Party has been faltering. We have no leadership. I believe that. We have nobody to compete against the Democratic machine right now, but we do have the wisdom of past individuals that were part of our government, and you're one of those icons. And basically what I'm asking tonight is what wisdom can you give us that things will be all right and decency will be restored to the United States? Can we bring a candidate forward that can accomplish what we need to accomplish?
Well, the short answer is yes. I've lived a third of the history of our country, which is a breathtaking thought. You multiply 81 times, 2023 and subtract it from 2014, and you end up right back at the very beginning. It's embarrassing to mention it, but there it is. It's a fact. It tells you how young our country is, or how old I am, or both. Now, I have seen people for decades say that the Democratic Party is dead, or it's never going to be defeated again. I've seen people say the Republican Party's dead, and it's never going to be defeated again. And we go through these ups and downs, and people look at the current situation, and to be sure, the respect of the American people for government is low today. In the case of the Congress, it may be about as low as since they've been taking polls. But maybe it's because I'm from the Midwest that I'm basically optimistic about our country, but I really believe that if you go back, Lyndon Johnson couldn't leave the White House. They had to put buses around the White House to keep people from breaking in. The protests were so violent. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, the city of Washington, D.C. was burning. The whole northeast section was burning. It was in Detroit and Watts, and it was a terrible time in our country's history. We've had presidents that have been shot at or assassinated since Roosevelt down in Miami, and Harry Truman by the Puerto Rican terrorists, and President Reagan, and President Ford was shot at. I was standing next to him out in California when that woman, Sarah Jane Moore, pulled the trigger and the bullet went past his head. And we've recovered. And now, to be sure, there has to be a tipping point in somewhere. And things, but when things get bad, people tend to get out of their chairs and change their priorities and push the pendulum back and where it belongs, where the country feels better about it. And I think that's our responsibility as individuals. I'm a Republican, but there was a that comes as no surprise. But there was a governor from Illinois named Adlai Stevenson who gave a speech at my senior banquet in 1954 at Princeton, where he talked about the citizens' responsibility and the task we have as individuals to help guide and direct the course of this country. And if we are uncomfortable with this country, if we're worried about it, the place to look for the solution is in the mirror. We're the ones who put people in office. We're the ones who made those decisions. We're the ones who are either comfortable with it or uncomfortable with it. And I was at Fort Leavenworth talking to, gosh, I think it was 1,490 majors from all over the country, and probably 10% of them from around the world. And they asked me the question, what worries you the most? And, you know, there's plenty of things you could talk about, Iran or North Korea, or proliferation of the lethal weapons, terrorism. My answer was, what worries me the most is American weakness. You cannot manage the economy of the United States like Western Europe and model it after that and not expect to end up with a weaker country and send signals out across the globe that the United States is not going to be there, that the United States is not going to have the kind of capabilities that we've had during my adult lifetime. And what happens is, the truth is that weakness is provocative. To the extent you create a vacuum, that vacuum gets filled, and it gets filled by people who do not have the values that our country has, that will not provide the stability and the rib cage in the world, that will not provide the deterrent and the dissuasion that causes people to behave in a way differently. If people see weakness, they take advantage of it. And so my response to you is, we've been through tougher times than this. If Abraham Lincoln had not done what he done, there wouldn't be a United States of America. And the Civil War was, without question, the most god-awful thing that happened in this country. It was a horrible thing. And yet it was a critically important thing. And what we need to do is recognize that things are not good, as you point out. That we can't send signals out of American weakness and not expect the world to become a less stable and a more dangerous place. When I went to Washington out of the Navy in 1957, we were spending 10% of GDP, gross domestic product, on defense. Today we're spending less than 4%. Our allies today are spending less than 2%. Other like-thinking countries in Western Europe. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean we should wring our hands and say, oh, woe is me? No, it means that what we need to do is to belong to organizations like this, to be engaged, to recognize that. Go to my website, rumsfeld.com, and get that Adlai Stevenson speech. He was right between his two defeats by Dwight Eisenhower. And I don't think he would have been a terribly good president. Stevenson, myself, I voted my first time for Eisenhower. But this speech is terrific because it causes you to think about yourself. And so the short answer is, this country is a great country. And it has to be what it can be if the world's going to be a safer place. And the only way it's going to be that way is if the people in this room and people across the country recognize that they can't say, well, it's somebody else's job. It's our job, each of us.
So what you're telling me is that you're giving me confidence again, and I believe that we can win the White House. Thank you.
I do indeed.